I have this line that I say all the time, like, it's like, um, through your obstacles, like, right, like finding the opportunity, through challenge, seeing the opportunity. But really what I'm talking about is like helping to deconstruct that, right? So that it does apply to a person in a C-suite, or it does apply to an organization, a nonprofit, a group of students. Like, we all have challenges that come up in our lives, but it's like, how can we see the opportunities through those challenges?
Welcome to Engage Presents. I'm Engage co-founder and president Jake Olson. In this interview series, I ask Engage talent the most common questions we hear from event planners to help you get to know them and their stories in 15 minutes or less. Thanks for listening. Welcome to another episode of Engage Presents. I am Engage president Jake Olson. Here with me today is one of the greatest men I've ever been able to meet. He was a huge part of why I was successful at USC and was honestly made me survive my freshman year almost single-handedly. He is the chief of staff now at Texas, which broke my heart, but we'll root for them so long as this Zoom call is going. But Jared, you are an avid runner, crazy man when it comes to that, an inspirational speaker, just really one of the best, again, men, guys you'll ever meet in your lifetime. Jared, I trust you with my life and everything I have. So thank you so much for just, being willing to do this today and come talking to me. I miss you so much, Jared, but thank you so much for coming.
Oh man, Jake, such an honor, and thanks so much for having me. And feel the exact same way about you. I mean, I always said that you were guiding us around when when it was me, you in Quebec. You were really taking the lead, and it was truly a privilege to be able to work with you at USC and be around you. And I took a lot of lessons from you, and you're truly an inspiring person, and just ultimately fun to be around.
Well, thank you, Jared. So to kind of just, again, I like to give people that idea of how special you were in my mind and are in my mind. But being kind of the job you have, kind of explain to people what the chief of staff looks like for being under Sark there in Texas, and kind of your job through the different athletic programs you've been in.
Yeah, I think my job, to really like put it into a sentence, is really to help the people within the facility, help put them in position for success. And it's like you're saying, right? Like, yeah, we have cleats for you, or this is the plan, giving people schedules, working with our operations team. I mean, we have so many people that are around this program that make it all possible. And it's really to help support those people. I think that's what a chief of staff does, is really try to empower the people around them and then make their jobs easier. And I really think that's really it in a sentence. So I know a lot more goes into that, from like the day-to-day operations and things like that, as you kind of dive deeper into it. But I think that's what it is from a holistic standpoint.
And you do great at that. And you're the best person I've ever seen do that. Jared, what's the most stressful part about that job? Because obviously you're running a tight ship there. You're making sure Coach Sark has all his wishes and demands met, but you're also, again, kind of juggling 100 different players with egos and other coaches, and we all know coaches are crazy. I mean, you're dealing with a ton of people, and I'm sure there's a lot that kind of gets thrown on your plate day by day.
Well, I think first and foremost, I think the people are what makes it the most enjoyable, right? And so that's the part that you just love. You love being around the people, and the environment, and all the different components of that, right? Like, be it student athletes or coaches, support staff. So it ranges in that way. And I think the most stressful part is like when you see someone struggling, or when you see somebody's who's, you make a decision and you're like, you realize like, oh wait, that actually had an impact on that person. So like learning those types of things. So it's, again, I think that goes back to what the ultimate mission is, which is like, I think as you look at leadership, it's, you're there to make other people's jobs easier. So when that doesn't happen, I think that's the most stressful part of the role.
Yeah, absolutely. All right, now let's talk about the fun things, because Jared, I kind of mentioned in the beginning, you are a crazy man, and I say that because I don't know who would do this if they weren't legitimately out of their mind. You have you're an ultramarathon runner, so there's a lot of different feats you've had with your running, including getting me to run a mile at least because that was difficult at times, and so that's might be one of your biggest feats. But I'm sure this takes the cake. You completed the World Marathon Challenge. I remember when you were doing this, I asked you, I said, "What is it?" And you go, "Yeah, it's 7 marathons in 7 days on the 7 continents in the world." And I couldn't understand why the heck you would ever do that, but you can explain why you did that one and just walk us through the logistics of that. I know, you told me a little bit about it, but it's crazy just the amount of talk about kind of, logistics and making people do their job. I mean, that's a whole, ordeal in within itself.
Yeah, it was probably one of the most fun races I've ever partaken in. And I know that that's not everyone's cup of tea, but definitely it's something I enjoyed. I saw this race on ESPN. I was sitting on my family's couch and saw this race where someone did 7 marathons in 7 days on 7 continents. And I was like, oh, that's a race I was born to run. And my whole family looked at me like I'm completely, to your point, nuts.
Yes.
To even think that. But I go back and, I grew up being diagnosed with dyslexia early. And I just remember going to school, um, practice spelling with my mom. Then I was lucky if a practice or I had some sort of activity break up the day. And then it was tutoring at night. So it was like school on top of school. And so the logistics growing up were kind of crazy to me. In that regard. And so I saw this race and I was like, and I always used running to deal with kind of the frustrations of learning life, what have it, put on my tennis shoes, go run out the door, go around the neighborhood until I couldn't run anymore. And back then, growing up, it was probably 2 or 3 laps. But as time went on, that distance increased and got into marathon running and then saw this race. And I was like, yeah, it just seemed like this was the environment for me to be in.
So I remember you kind of telling me like you're on the plane, you're trying to rehab and just kind of, almost prehab at the same time. You're kind of lack of sleep for sure. At what point was there any point that you were just sitting there like, how do I continue to get off this plane and run?
Yeah, so it's interesting enough. So in my third marathon at the 22-mile mark, I hear like a click in my leg, and my whole left side had locked up where I couldn't get a rotation out of my stride anymore. And I hobble through that race, and so that still 4 more marathons to go. I just remember somebody coming up to me and saying, "Just get to Dubai. Don't worry about anything else. Just get to Dubai." And I get on the phone after that race in Perth, and I talked to my coach, and I'm like, "Yeah, my whole left side's locked up. The pain's like in my knee." And he's like, "Oh, is it on the center?" And I'm like, "Yeah, kind of." And he's like, "But on the outside?" And I go, "Yes." And I'm like, "How do you even know this?" He goes, "Well, here's the good news. The good news is when I was in a 100-mile race, I had the same thing happen to me, and I know you can keep running on it." And, you know, growing up, the doctor, when I was diagnosed with dyslexia, told me, like, hey, having dyslexia and going through the education process until you're about 18, it's going to be like running with a cut on your bottom of the foot. And I don't think she realized how literally I was going to take her with the running part, but all those things kind of made sense to me. And so when I was in that moment of like, well, how am I going to do this? I just needed to know it was possible.
And that's where it becomes real relatable to C-suites and people in the in a professional environment at their work because everyone from an analogy standpoint when you're running a business you're going to have times where you're in the middle of a year a fiscal year whatever it is and your proverbial left knee locks up and all of a sudden your business isn't running the way it did for the first half of the year. You got to figure out how to get through that finish line and get to the end of the year where you can recover and adapt. And so that's kind of what you go and speak about and bring to those type of companies, that culture of continuing to figure out a way.
Yeah, no, I think that's really well said. I look at it as like I have this line that I say all the time, like, it's like, um, through your obstacles, like, right, like finding the opportunity, through challenge, seeing the opportunity. But really what I'm talking about is like helping to deconstruct that, right? So that it does apply to a person in a C-suite, or it does apply to an organization, a nonprofit, a group of students. Like we all have challenges that come up in our lives, but it's like, how can we see the opportunities through those challenges? So I think it's a great tagline, but it becomes real for people when you can deconstruct it and talk about the process of like breaking that down into the elements, so that then there's something for them to take away and something for them to grow with.
That's awesome. One last question here, because I think this is one of the coolest things about your story as well. Your proceeds of speaking, when you do speak, proceeds go to the scholarship you set up for the distance running. You want to speak about that real quick, just because I think it's such a cool part about your story as well.
Yeah, so a lot of these running challenges that I've done in the past have like been fundraisers and opportunities to raise awareness around dyslexia.
Mhm.
And so it was going to the International Dyslexia Association. Even the World Marathon Challenge, we raised $50,000 for the International Dyslexia Association. And throughout this process, I connected with Park Academy. And now we have the Running the Distance Scholarship in Park Academy, which is in Portland, Oregon, or Lake Oswego, Oregon. And it's really the only school in Oregon that's dedicated to serving students with dyslexia. And so what I'm committed to now is all the fees that I make from my speaking engagements are going to go support that scholarship fund so that we can keep it going. Right now, we've raised basically a quarter of a scholarship. I have the goal to raise a half scholarship, and I have, benchmarks. These are benchmarks along the way to wanting to have a full scholarship, because I recognize how privileged I was growing up to come from a family with resources and means to get me tested, get me resources through tutoring, having occupational therapy to work on those fine motor skills. And I just want to be able to provide that for people that, might not have that opportunity to serve students like myself. And I really look at it as like carrying on the mission that my parents gave to me and my family gave to me, and wanting to pass that along.
Like I said in the beginning, Jared Blank, one of the best men you ever meet. Jared, appreciate just you sharing a little bit of the mindset from leadership and the way you run a program at a high level to just overcoming challenges, pushing yourself. All those things are so applicable in today's world, either from a personal or professional standpoint. So thank you for sharing a little bit about that. If you want to book Jared, and you do, trust me, go to letsengage.com. You can check out his profile there, learn more about him, book him. And Jared, we look forward to just helping you continue to raise those funds for what we want to make a full scholarship, but just being able to get you to share your story, more and more people to get to know you, Jared, because again, I think you are one of the best people I've ever been able to meet. So thank you so much for joining us today.
Thanks for having me. I really appreciate the opportunity, Jake, and it's awesome to work with Let's Engage.
Awesome, Jared. Thank you, and stay tuned for more Engage Presents.